It's like a family tree, part of you and part of me.
Hey, welcome to a Badge of Honor podcast, rebranded from the Mad Radio. We want to welcome all our transfer guests to our new show, powered by OBBM Network, streaming live on a lot of different platforms. I want to welcome Sam. How you doing, Sam?
Doing great, John. Great to be with everybody. It's an exciting day.
It's an exciting day. You know, Mad Radio went for a good three years, and it's the same show, the same content. We just kind of rebranded because people are getting confused with our 501c3, a Badge of Honor. So we want to make sure we wanted to compress everything into one, so no one gets confused, and the resources are readily available to all our first responders out there. So everything's the same except the name and the times. We are your drive time first responder network. We're going to be here for your ride home from work. So take solace in knowing that you are not alone, and we hear you.
Absolutely, John. And, you know, we are coming off National Suicide Awareness Day. That was Saturday, right into September 11th, the 21st anniversary of the terrorist attacks. Just, I still can't believe that 21 years have gone by. I know you can recall exactly where you were, everything that happened on that day, just like I can. And it's a time right now where we need to be backing our first responders. Okay, there is a lot of rhetoric out there. There's still a big movement to defund. Those cities that did learned real quick that they need our men and women in blue, red, yellow, you name it.
Right.
They need us. They need first responders. And, you know, our guest tonight, he's no stranger to 9/11. And I think it's incredibly awesome that it just worked out this way. That John, we have two Johns on tonight. People, don't be confused.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to tell us a little bit about his 9/11 story, because John, you always say we were meant to meet for a reason, right? People cross your path for a reason. And I do believe that it was meant that I reached out to John a while back, and that he is our first guest. So, you know, we are talking about your mental health, post-traumatic stress, your wellness, and beyond. And so, John Muley, welcome to a Badge of Honor podcast.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, John, for having me on tonight.
Welcome. How are you?
We're very good. How are you tonight?
You know, John, this is a unique dynamic here. You know, I was at the Dallas 9/11 stair climb this weekend, and then we did the reading of the names, and I know Sam did with one of our partners, Carry the Load. They did a whole bunch of 9/11 stuff, and we have a lot of upcoming stuff. But all of us, we share the same experience, but we've all been affected in different ways. And individuality is the biggest thing with post-traumatic stress. The way we take each journey, everybody has a different journey. And with your organization, you have a lot of great outlets to offer our first responders.
Yeah, before we get into John's mission, John, can you just tell everybody, how did you get where you are today?
Well, it's a little bit of a long story to tell you exactly how I got to where I was today, but like many people, it started on 9/11. And right up until then, I had a pretty uneventful career as a New York City cop. And then on September 11th, '01, I was working at 25 Broadway, right outside the Statue of the Bull on Wall Street. So I was there for the entire attack. I was there for the next 2 days. And then I spent 3 months working at the Family Assistance Center with the families. And that was where I really got my first lesson in psychology and mental health and what could actually do for people. Because I was assigned to a team that 3 times a day would take the families of the missing and the deceased down into the pit so they could see the rescue effort. And we was very carefully crafted by my lieutenant. She had a PhD in psychology. So we placed all kinds of supports for the family, everything from Red Cross volunteers to rescue dogs to clergy members. But it was the officers in my unit that were the main source of contact for the families. And the vast majority of us did not have a background in psychology other than the kind of street psychology that every cop has. But we learned pretty quickly that in a situation like that, all you can really do is give people a shoulder to cry on and hope they don't see you crying with them.
Well, John, let me interrupt you real quick because we're talking 21 years ago,
Yep.
right? Back when, right now, 21 years later, we're just kind of scratching the surface on post-traumatic stress and mental health within our first responders. Mm-hmm. Back 21 years ago, I can't imagine how hard it was to really do what you did without any support networks, because 21 years ago, we didn't really have too much in place to help. So that was a huge undertaking that you guys had to do.
Yes, John. And you know what? Yeah, you know how there's always every now and then there's a song lyric that when you hear it, it reminds you of a point in your life. Every time I hear the lyric, I wish to God I didn't know now the things I didn't know then. That always takes me back there. So, needless to say, although that was the best work that I think I ever did in my career, it left a mark. And in 2006, I retired from the NYPD because of PTSD and also lung damage. And for about a decade, I had a very nice, quiet, retired life. And then a dear friend of mine reached out to me because he was starting a new company. It is now known as Forge VFR. Back then, it was known as Veteran and First Responder Healthcare. And they were a mental health and substance abuse treatment provider specifically for veterans and first responders. And we were particularly effective because not only was almost all of the management and many of the clinicians, first responders and veterans themselves, but we also had been in treatment for PTSD, for substance abuse, for all kinds of things. So we were able to speak to people with a lot of credibility that other providers couldn't have. Now, my friend was former Navy, so he had a lot of people on the military side, but he didn't have anybody on the first responder side. And he knew that, being in treatment for all these years, having PTSD, he wanted somebody that could come in and help design a program specifically for first responders with those issues. And it was a great experience for me. I got to help work on their first responder program. I was a police academy instructor, so I wrote all of their initial training materials. I created all of their relationships with the law enforcement community in New England. And for a couple of years, my friend had been encouraging me to go out on my own and start my own shop for training. And in the summer of 2020, 3 things happened in the same week that made me realize it was time.
Hey, John, those 3 things are super important because they're going to lead us right into your website. But first, we got to take a quick break to hear from OBBM Network. We'll be right back.
Interested in starting a podcast or TV show? Worried about what you'll say and how to keep it engaging? Think you'd like to be a guest on podcast, radio, or TV shows? Hi, I'm Susan Hamilton, owner and founder of OBBM Network, and I would like to invite you to an OBBM media training to get the tools you need for a relaxed and polished performance you'll be proud to share. Our specialized training techniques include role play, voice training, and everything you need to deliver a confident, clear, and engaging interaction. Go to offbeatbusiness.com. Go to the calendar and register for a training that's convenient for you. Dates available now, 214-714-0495.
Hey, we are back. Thank you to OBBM Network. And John, you are about to tell us like the 3 things that happened. Left us kind of on our seats there.
In the summer of 2020, as I was saying, 3 things happened in the same week. One, I finished writing our psychological survival school program, which was a 2-year project I had been working on. That same week, the executive director of the Chiefs Association called me because his psychological presenter at his trade show had dropped out at the last minute, and he asked me if I could help. And I told him I had this new program. He said, "Great, let's do it." And unfortunately, in that weekend, we had 2 law enforcement suicides in New Hampshire in the same weekend. One of them was in the town where I live. So that was my sign that it was finally time to do this. And at 12:01 a.m. on September 11th, 2020, Mission First Partners became a New Hampshire corporation. And it was very important for me to do it on that day, because that was my way of taking this day that had haunted me for, at that time, was the last 19 years, and try to turn it around into something that could help people.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's it is for a lot of us that have been through traumas, whether it be something like 9/11 or the cumulative trauma that comes with being in law enforcement, being a first responder, the growth or that post-traumatic purpose, if you will, that can come from it, until we realize and kind of listen or notice the signs, the God winks, whatever you want to call them, that we are meant to use and grow from the scars that we've been left with, to allow others to get better from what we've been through.
And there is very much something to that. I say all the time, when I was retired, I had a nice, quiet little life. I had no stress. I had my routine. I tell people, if you think I wanted God touching me on the shoulder and saying, "You need to do this," I'm about the last guy on earth that wanted that. But here we are. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask something, John. With all your experience from back in 2001, I want to get your point of view, because like I said, it's really big for me on the scratching the surface and the mental health issues, the stigma that we're fighting against, and the obstacles that you went through. Do you see one, a progress, a positive progress in our mental health programs that is helping out our first responders?
I see progress, but we still have a very long way to go. So since 2019, the number of departments in the U.S. that have instituted mental health programs has pretty much doubled. The downside to that is it's gone from 5% to 10%. So we still have quite a ways to go.
Now, out of that 10%, yeah, and me and Sam have seen this in many of our workshops. In those 10% that implemented programs, how many are really effective?
That unfortunately has been a very big problem, because one of the things when I wrote our program, and also when I started this company, working with VFR, I got to go and see a lot of presentations on law enforcement mental health, different training programs and things like that. And 2 things always stood out to me for almost every one of them that I saw. One, I never saw somebody get up in front of the room and say, "I'm a cop, I have PTSD. This is what I've gone through. These are the things I've experienced." And the other thing I noticed was the vast majority of them, I'd say almost all of them, were nothing more than very nice, very expensive pep talks. They gave people no tools to use. They gave departments no roadmap as to how to institute a peer support or a SISM program. Some, instead of using the proven programs that come from places like the ICISF, they freelanced on their own programs. So that is a very big issue, John, that, the quality of these programs were all over the place, but also because of a lack, not so much a lack of standardization, because most every qualified peer support and SISM program I've ever seen follows the ICIF protocols. There are people that have freelanced, and that has gone on over the years. So that's this kind of standardization we really need to get to.
And that's really important because part of
Sorry, I lost my internet connection.
part of what you do at Mission First Partners is you're working specifically with that department. You've got a 3-step process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they're calling you in to be a consultant, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And you are doing and working very specifically with them so that things don't fall through the cracks. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I myself have expertise in many things. I don't consider myself an expert at anything, but one thing I do think I'm extremely good at is building great teams. And I think I've built one of the best teams in the law enforcement, mental health, and wellness space. One of my partners is a clinical psychologist who's been working in law enforcement mental health since the mid-70s, when there was about 4 people in the entire country thinking about this kind of stuff. He's also a police chief with 43 years of experience, so he can speak with that kind of credibility.
Wow.
My other partner is an MD with 25 years of experience. So when we go in and speak to departments, although I always speak from the lens of someone who has experienced PTSD, and I don't try to make it any more than what that is. For my expert opinions, I have my partners that I go to, and they do their part, and they have their own information that they give, and their lessons that they teach.
Go ahead, John. Yeah.
No, I was just, because my internet connection kicked off. My second part to that question on the pencil whipping. You being on NYPD, myself, and I brought this up to Sam. With the lack, when you say they're not, the programs aren't up to par. In our own department, the NYPD, back when De Blasio was mayor, they put 6 psychiatrists on the payroll to heal 36,000 officers.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like, all right, I can go get car insurance for $35, and yes, I'm covered. Until that accident happens. And I see a lot of departments just pushing this through to say we have it.
And that is exactly what I was just about to say, and that's one of the things that we run into a lot, is that departments that just want to check off the boxes.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say that's everybody. I know some chiefs that are absolutely fantastic about this stuff. They care about their cops like they're their own families. And all they want to know is that they don't want to know why their cops are accessing these services. They just want to know that they have the ability for them to do that. And that's my perfect chief. The problem is, for every one of those people, I probably have 5 more that are at best indifferent and at worst hostile to the idea of this. And some of it is antiquated thinking, and some of it, I'm not even sure what the thought process is. I actually had a chief say to me one time, he didn't want to know if one of his people was having problems, because then he owns them forever. And I had to say, Chief, I hate to tell you, you own them forever anyway. And more importantly, you own whatever they're going to do while they're not getting help for those issues.
Absolutely. And we have seen that time and time again. And that's why it's a lot easier for the chiefs. I'm not saying money, budget isn't an issue, but it's a lot easier to make the investment in your people, bring in folks like you, Mission First Partners, and let you do the heavy lifting with that safety net that the chief knows, okay, if my folks need assistance, they've got somewhere or somewheres, plural, to go to get that. I know as the chief that they're covered, which means I'm covered. And you've got the open dialogue, which means the stigma, because what you just said about chiefs being indifferent and not wanting to know, that's the stigma and the hostility. The hostility and John, you told me a story that happened just the last night with your interaction with police out in Portland, and talk about stigma. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And John, you just hit it on the head. A lot of these chiefs and upper brass, you're a mental health liability, and they're scared of that.
And that is the other thing that we're really trying so hard to educate departments about, is that it's partly reducing liability, but it's not reducing liability by getting rid of people. It's reducing liability by getting your people healthy, getting them well, getting them the help they need, and getting them back to work. John, I don't have to tell you, 16 years ago, when I went to the NYPD and I told them I was getting help for PTSD, that day I knew my career was over. I was done. And 16 years later, I know it didn't have to be that way. So there's nothing I can do for myself now, but I want to try to save somebody else's career in that way.
Right.
And that is that is so important. And, part of that is being aligned, us with you with other organizations, where we are all on the same page, moving towards a common goal, which is smashing the stigma and caring for our first responders. And got to take a quick break so that we can talk about how we move freely, America. Stand by. We'll be right back.
All right.
What is the role of American government anyway? Is the role of government to decide where I can go and where I can't? Is the role of government to work tirelessly to destroy vital infrastructure that keeps goods and services from my customers? Is the role of government to choose who can drive, fly, or ride according to mandated stipulations that threaten my body, health, mind, and conscience? Without medical freedom legislation in place, our rights and freedoms are one vote away from being dissolved. Individually, change is improbable, but as an aggregate, attainable. It's time to act with one voice. My voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
To protect our freedom, creating one voice that cannot be ignored. This requires your voice, too. Your voice, your feet, your vote, not just at the ballot box, but training to be a poll watcher, precinct chair, judge, or early ballot counter, so you are doing all you can to protect the fairly counted American vote. Move freely, America. Go to movefreelyamerica.org to find a chapter near you. Plug in, donate, and help our legislators defend our God-given rights under the Constitution. Move freely, America, because my voice
and my voice,
together with your voice, we're one voice that cannot be ignored. Donate today. MoveFreelyAmerica.org.
Hey, welcome back. What I was going to say before we broke, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sam, is that, with the mental health, did you ever foresee, like Sam, when with the towers, you talk about the crisis intervention teams, and I think that's where a lot of people are a little skewed with. They think, oh well, we had the crisis intervention team come in. We sat 20 people in a room. Nobody said anything. Everybody's fine. Everybody's okay. Go back to work, robots. But no one was able to foresee from 2001 the mental effects it would have after these men and women retired, and the effects that it had throughout that, as they held all this trauma inside.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, there is a time and a place for the crisis team, of course.
Yes.
But it's what occurs after, because that peel of the onion, that veil has been lifted. We know it's not one and done. We've learned that lesson time and time and time again. But like John just said, with only 10% of the departments out there understanding that, hey, it's a lot more than just one meeting after a crisis affects your department that matters, because we know how post-traumatic stress now operates. And folks, thanks for joining us. We have John Muley on for Mission First Partners. We are talking about mental health awareness, post-traumatic stress awareness, and how to smash the stigma. So John, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, Sam, and honestly, I don't want you to feel like I'm beating up on you or anything like that, but sayings like that, those are one of the things that we need to get past, because people, they say those things, or they make a Facebook post, they make a LinkedIn post, and they think they've done their part. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but like one of the ones that always gets me is, it's okay not to be okay. Well, guess what? There's a lot of departments where it isn't okay not to be okay. John's and mine was one of them. And I've talked to cops where, and it's an unfortunate thing that you have to say, but I've talked to cops where I've had to tell them, do not under any circumstances tell your department you're getting treatment. That doesn't mean you're not going to get treatment. I am going to show you how to get that treatment in a way that your department isn't going to know about it. But it's unfortunate that you have people struggling with those things in those situations, that's what they have to resort to, instead of just being open about this.
Well, the word okay, and I kind of agree with you on a point when you say it's not okay to be okay. I mean, it's okay to not be okay, right? Yeah. And here's the problem, because when you ask any first responder, you ask any veteran, hey, how you doing? What's their response? I'm okay, right? It's the follow-up that we fail to do. And we have to provide that through proper education and proper awareness, that we have to break that uncomfortable factor where we can't just leave, I'm okay, and that's it. We have to move past that and say, well, let's sit down and really talk.
And that's exactly it. When we were working in the family center, one of the chaplains, he was very easy to spot because he was a big guy, and he also had an artificial arm, one of the old hook kinds. And one day I'm in the back and I'm having a cup of coffee, and he sits down, he strikes up a conversation with me, and he asks me, how are you doing? And just like everybody else, I said, I'm okay. And he said, no, really, how are you doing? And I said, no, really good. No, I'm okay. I'm fine. He said, okay. And he said, it's just something I want you to keep in mind over the years. He said, I work with Vietnam vets. And he said, I have guys that one day wake up and blow their brains out 30 years after the war ended. And he said, right up until the moment they do it, he said, they'll all tell you they're okay. And one of the things that a lot of departments don't realize they really need to do is they need to create relationships with people's families. Because if you really want to know how somebody's doing, you never ask them how they are. You ask the people closest to them how they're doing.
Right, exactly. And that's where, like a badge of honor, we started the family workshops to let families learn and become educated in signs, in flags, in code words, and in conversation, because many people who are unaware on how to talk to somebody who's battling post-traumatic stress, the simplest word will set somebody off into a trigger and put them into a defense mechanism. I was just speaking earlier this afternoon with an NYPD officer, and we were discussing that very thing. We've been screamed at our whole career, right? We've been yelled at. We've been called vile names on the street. And when our spouses or our family members use certain words or certain inflections or certain tones, our trigger immediately goes up into a defense mode, and we treat our families and our spouses like perps.
We
because
do.
That's what we know.
We do. It took my wife a long time to figure out why, when our kids would lie to me, I would just Go EDP. Because, because, because I said when I was on the street, people lied to me every day of my life, and that
Yeah.
wasn't something I was going to tolerate from my kids. But when you're kind of one of the things that I always say about dealing with PTSD is it gives you tunnel vision. It stops you from seeing options in life. So you're not thinking these are my kids. You go right into that fallback mode of somebody's lying to me and I have to do something about it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you're treated like a robot for 20 years plus, right? By command, and you're given orders. So it's inbred into you, and we never have that moment of throughout a 20-year career to decompress, to take, you work 300 hours on a street. We don't get a 16-hour decompression where we can vent this out and talk. And airline pilots, radar, what do you call it? I can't think, the control
Air
tower
traffic
guy.
controllers.
Yeah.
After a certain amount of hours on the board, they immediately go for a psychological counseling because of the stress. Police officers, firefighters, and EMTs, they don't get that opportunity. They are all looked at, and like you said, liabilities and robots. Do the job, go home. Do the job, go home. Do the job.
And that's it. John, one of the best things I was ever told in the police department, and I say best very sarcastically, just because you're necessary doesn't mean that you're important.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much how we were treated. But when you talk about, and that's one of the things that I talk about in my training, usually when people think about PTSD, they think about the military. And there are links between the two, but there's a pretty big difference too. And the difference is intensity versus duration. Now, if you're in the military, if you're in a combat zone, no doubt you have a very high exposure to trauma. But yet at the same time, anybody who's ever been in the military knows you have a lot of downtime in between missions, and you're living with people that you can talk about the things that you've been doing. Whereas when you're talking about first responders, it's not that same intensity of trauma, but it's that same going back cycle every day, day after day. No break, no let up, always by yourself, never get to talk to anybody about it.
And you know what? And it's funny you say that, and I'm sorry, Sam, but the NYPD just implemented a program. I don't know if you saw it or not, that now cops can't even talk to each other on the street.
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yeah, how do you force that, by the way? Just like, we're stopping for coffee. I can't talk to you.
He doesn't want more than 4 cops congregating on a street or 2 cops congregating on a street. How do you do that?
And you know what? It is especially disappointing coming from somebody who was on the job themselves. I mean, at de Blasio or something, I could say they don't know any better. But yeah, that's the tough part.
I hate to say it was because when Adams was on the job, nobody wanted to talk to him anyway. So he was a solo guy. So.
As you can hear, this has been the NYPD bashing hour with John and John. No,
but you know what? And
but it's
believe
well
me,
deserved. It's well deserved because it's their attitudes. The NYPD or Secret Service, we had one debriefing. It's those attitudes that lead to the folks not wanting to ask for help because they know if they say something, their gun and their badge is going to be taken away. And it's this culture of just don't say anything. So then they get home, they don't say anything, or they're lashing out. There's no in between.
Right.
Yeah, well, after you get your initial physical to go into the NYPD, you're never given another physical again for the next 20 years. No. So the idea is you pretend you're okay, and so will we. But Sam, despite, yes, John and I will bash the NYPD, and a lot of it is very well deserved. But I got to say, too, even they have been making some moves. Last year, we were vendors at the National Conference on Law Enforcement, Wellness, and Trauma. And the NYPD actually had one of their therapy dogs there. And they've brought in outside agencies, I know, like Warriors Rest, that have done programs with them. So believe me, they still have a long way to go, but it's also a very different department from the one that I retired from. I mean, back then, the attitude was, we're the NYPD. People come to us. We don't go to anybody else.
Exactly, exactly. And you know what? We got to take a quick break to find out how our next sponsor can come to you. Stay tuned, everybody. Be right back.
Every business needs a dependable junk hauling service to keep their property clutter-free. Call 630-470-8307. Junk Luggers offers a wide range of eco-friendly residential and commercial junk removal services to help your business run smoothly and efficiently. Book your no-obligation estimate with Junk Luggers today. Banks and credit unions have unique junk, and Junk Luggers knows the business. Professional organizers, senior living communities, we're helping everyone clean up and start new. If you're redecorating, remodeling, or getting ready for new tenants, Junk Luggers will donate, recycle, and do our best to keep it out of the landfill. Call 630-470-8307. That's 630-470-8307 today.
Welcome
We're back with John Millay from Mission First Partners. So, yeah, go ahead, John. You were right.
The one thing when you brought up like Warriors Rest, right? I haven't had firsthand dealings with them, but what I am seeing is a lot of organizations that are not properly vetted.
John, you just hit on one of my biggest sources of stress. In the last couple of years, law enforcement mental health has become very topical, and which I think is great. Unfortunately, because it's become topical, the market has been absolutely flooded with hacks, and they are very social media savvy, and they are relentless self-promoters. And these are the people that other people that are really doing quality work are trying to be heard over. And my good friend Tom Coughlin, he's a psychologist that specializes in law enforcement. He's also a retired detective from the NYPD.
Sounds familiar. I think I know. I've heard the name.
He's quoted a lot. He wrote a great article on all the fakes, fraud, charlatans, snake oil salesmen that we see out there. I mean, I've seen everybody from selling bogus chaplain's credentials to first responder counseling certifications, to the people at the top of my list actually claim they can cure PTSD.
Oh yeah, don't get us started with that one. Ooh,
so
yeah.
it's gotten to a point where when I make an argument, I always like to make an educated argument. So I always look into the claims. I see something like that, I don't even have to do that, because I know if that was actually true, I wouldn't be reading about it on a website. It would be on the cover of every psychology journal in the world.
Well, with your vast experience going back to 2001 and all your years and your knowledge, let me ask something, because I think the non-vetted organizations end up causing a lot more damage to our officers, responders, because I've heard, on officers in crisis, he'll call up on a Friday afternoon. He'll be like, "Oh, well, we got nobody available. Call back Monday." What is a good way? Your opinion? What is a good way for an officer or any other first responder to be able to recognize one of these so-called organizations of charity?
Okay, well, I actually have a few, and this is something I really want to educate people to, because it's funny. We're cops, we're always suspicious of everybody, and this they just buy into, because I really think it's because they don't know any better. So one of the first things to look for is what I call the pseudo PhD. So whenever you see a program that's led by a PhD, I always think we're off to a good start. And unfortunately, more often than not, when I start looking into their background, I see their PhD is in organizational management from Matchbook University or some kind of online diploma mill or something like that. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a degree in organizational management, but if you try to hold that out as a credential for running a psychological program for law enforcement, that's kind of like me using my economics degree to open an architectural firm that builds bridges. I could probably get away with it. I might even be able to sell somebody a bridge.
Until those bridges,
I
bridges start
guarantee you,
falling
you wouldn't
down.
let me drive across any bridge that I build. Another thing to look for, and this is not always sure because there are a few that have gotten by, but look for an affiliation with a major national organization, particularly the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the FOP. Tom Coughlin, he's on their vetting board for their mental health providers. So that's one of the big things you want to look for too. And also one of the biggest things, if anybody tries to tell you that a 5-hour program or some little thing that you can check in with, if they try to tell you that's going to replace a decade of therapy, run in the other direction, because it's not going to.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is part of why, not only for the podcast, but for what John, Jeff, and I, and our other John, we got lots of Johns. I love it. What we take the time to look at, because it's the partnerships that are going to go the extra mile in terms of assist and not let people fall through that net. It may not be a good fit, just like there's not one size fits all with therapy, right? You may be somebody where recreational therapy, that's your thing, and being outside, being in a kayak, climbing a mountain, whatever it is, that gets your head in the space where it needs to be so that you can function on the job, you can function at home. It like hits all the boxes, right? I mean, of course, we are big proponents of not necessarily that traditional therapy, we're sitting on the couch, but receiving something, whether it's like EMDR or something further, so that you've really got a solid foundation to build upon. And you can click on links and ask questions, because the more you learn in this crazy journey called post-traumatic stress, the better off in the end you're going to be. So after 21 years, you can sit on a podcast like this and talk about, buildings falling and seeing the things that you.
And one thing I try to educate people to, and I think it's a problem of unrealistic expectations.
Sure.
People think there's a way to beat PTSD, to get better, to get over it. And I tell them that this isn't like a broken arm that you're going to have a cast on it for a while and then you're going to be better. There's no beating PTSD, myself included. I'm a damaged person. I'm always going to be a damaged person. It's not about fixing anything. It's about learning how to live with the way you are now.
Right. Learning how to heal and cope.
And I think that word damaged is even could even be part of a pushing a stigma, because nobody wants to think of themselves as damaged goods. It's almost
but you know what?
We got to be managed.
You own the damage, and you own the damage, and
you do.
That's how you
own it.
Get past it.
Right. You own it. You manage it, and but it's with you. It is with you.
When I was talking to this other NYPD officer today, we discussed that same thing, and vulnerability is very important in the healing process. And I told him, the more you speak your story to people and share it, the less it hurts.
Yep.
And that's what we have to start teaching our first responders, is to share your story. It's nothing to be embarrassed about and nothing to be, shy about. I mean, I was not able to tell my story for a long time without breaking down, and Sam can tell you. I've come in 2 years. Now I'm able to share my story without crying or really feeling anxious.
Yeah. And more so than that, John, we always talk about changing the culture. The culture is like a battleship. It takes a very, very long time to turn around. The way we can start changing the culture now is that it's that honesty. It's people telling their stories, telling what they've been through. When I first started this, I was very, very guarded with talking about myself, and I didn't really do a lot of it. I wanted to try to keep up, professional demeanor and everything. And then one day I just said, the hell with it. I'm going to talk about, the things that I experienced and everything like that. And that day in that class that I taught, I always have a section at the end where people can just stand up and, talk about whatever's on their mind. 3 people got up and talked about stuff that they had been struggling with. And
Yep.
I was so blown away. My friend Laura is a clinical psychologist. I was talking to her about it that night. I was telling her about it. And later on, she sent me a text. Laura's a big Maya Angelou fan. And she sent me a text that said, people forget what you say. People forget what you do. People never forget how you make them feel.
Amen to that.
And that is, and even more so than changing the culture, that is how I've found we break through a lot of people's resistance. Because one of the things I find when people are in the throes of PTSD, they think nobody, even though they know other people have had PTSD, they think nobody understands. They think nobody knows what they've been through there before. And every time I hear that, what I say to people is, okay, if you don't want to talk about your story, let me tell you about mine. And I tell them a little bit about what I've been through. And I said, just so you know, at the end, when the job was really gassing me up because they were trying to get me to quit before they had to retire me, I would go through spells where I thought I was seeing burned up people all around me. So I know what it's like to be afraid of your own mind. So now can we talk?
Yeah.
And they usually open up after that.
Yeah.
We had, in our last workshop, we had a 27 or 32-year veteran who never spoke about any traumas. And when we opened up, he felt comfortable enough to start sharing his story. And it was powerful. It was
Really
Yeah.
was.
And John, I found the most resistant people when you finally make that connection and you get that little crack in the facade, you can't stop them. It comes like what you just said, 32 years of stuff just comes pouring out.
Which is not a great thing. And that's why, because you got to watch when you open up Pandora's box, you got to be able to make sure you can close it at times so you don't spiral. And you got to do it in an atmosphere that's safe. And you got to have certain people with that level of knowledge and medical professionalism.
And that's it exactly. And that's why when we train CISM, we talk about warm handoffs and being able to find resources for people and all the things you need to do this correctly.
Yep, there is a progressive there. You can't just let someone open up and go, well, see you later.
No,
you have to be able to.
You're going to get comfortable because you're going to be there for a while. And what you said about availability, when I've talked to people that wanted to partner and stuff like that, one of the first things I tell them, and I'm very upfront about this, that phone rings at 2 a.m. It better not ring 3 times, because after the second time, I'm losing somebody.
Yeah, and it is about building trust from us telling our stories and being very vulnerable. We got to take a quick break. We will be right back.
Move freely, America, without medical restrictions or penalty. Without medical freedom legislation in place, our rights and freedoms are one vote away from being dissolved. Move freely, America, with one voice, without fear of retribution, achieving a common goal, medical freedom. We the people make our voices heard by connecting with state legislators and engaging a constitutionally compliant medical Bill of Rights for all citizens. Individually, change is improbable, but as an aggregate, attainable. It's time to act with one voice. My voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
To protect our freedom, creating one voice that cannot be ignored. This requires your voice, too. Move Freely America. Go to movefreelyamerica.org to find a chapter near you. Plug in, donate, and help our legislators defend our God-given rights under the Constitution. Move Freely America. My voice.
And my voice.
And together with your voice, we're one voice that cannot be ignored. Donate today. MoveFreelyAmerica.org.
Hey, welcome back.
A big thank you to MoveFreelyAmerica.org. We are back live with Mission First Partners founder John Muley. John, you were going to say something.
Just getting back to that conversation,
Yeah.
and this is this is where I know me and Sam and Jeff and John battle a lot because we hate to see people making the wrong turn and
Yep.
not being properly cared for by a lot of organizations out there. And hopefully in the near future, with with education and everything else,
Mhm.
that we can stop that and we can really get the healing for these first responders that is needed.
And that's one of the and that is one of my main missions. And you know what? It's not even in my well, it is in my space in the corporate world, but even in the nonprofit world. Unfortunately, there's some nonprofits out there doing really, really great work, and unfortunately, they get tarred with the same brush of all these places that exist. Well, that, of course, they always have a mission statement, but they basically exist to give big salaries to their boards of directors and executive directors, and practically nothing actually goes into helping people.
Yeah, we see that. We see that in our space as well. And in terms of the wellness component, it is one thing to talk about PTS and kind of the awareness piece. When you're talking about post-traumatic stress and you're talking about somebody in stress with anxiety, you got to treat the whole person. And health and wellness comes into that, because if you're not getting good sleep, if you don't even know how to reset your clock, if you're eating like crap, that really plays into your symptomology. And so, John, tell us a little bit about your wellness component with Mission First Partners.
So we have two halves. We have a psychological and a physical wellness component. The psychological wellness component is a full-day training program called Psychological Survival School. And I was very much at loath to use the term survival when I wrote it, because I think it's been so overused when we talk about law enforcement mental health. But I suddenly realized all we've ever done is talk about survival. We've never actually taught people how to survive. And that was my light bulb moment. So it was the culmination of a 2-year project trying to answer one question. And that question is, today, mental health treatment is so much more available than it's ever been. Departments are more open to it. Officers are more open to it. So why in 2019 did we have the highest number of law enforcement suicides we ever had since records had been kept? And there was only one answer that made sense to me. And that is, when we look at law enforcement mental health, we're looking at a continuum. And on one end, you have resilience, and on the other end, you have professional treatment. And it's all good stuff. It's all very important. But we never asked ourselves what happens when resilience fails and people either can't or won't go into professional treatment. What do we have in that messy middle? And the answer is, we've never had anything. And I honestly believe that's where we're losing so many people to suicide. So I wrote a program where we take people who are either teetering on the edge or they're in the spiral of PTSD. And I want to make it clear, we don't say that our program should be substituted for mental health. We're saying this is something that is going to help you stay alive until you can get to that professional mental health treatment.
Correct.
So it's a full-day program, and it comes with our companion app called True North. And True North, we're very proud of. That is a app that officers that have been through the class check in with once a week. And it gives them, measures their stress. It gives them what we call a stress score. And it also reinforces the lessons that are learned in the class. We set the app up for each particular department. So if that stress score hits what we consider a critical level, they get a pop-up where they get one button connection to whatever their department's mental health resources are, whether it's peer support, a clinician, whatever their resources are. When they're in that crisis, they only have to hit one button to get connected to help. Because we know when people are teetering on that edge of suicide, we got a very, very small window where we're going to pull them back in. So we try to put everything we possibly can into that window. On the side of our physical health programs, we talk about the things that many wellness programs do, like diet and exercise and things like that. But we take it a good step further. Our wellness programs are supervised by a licensed board certified MD. So when we go into a department, we're not just talking about diet and exercise. We're talking about risk factors and how to treat things like coronary artery disease, hypertension, diabetes, the things that are actually killing us. And we also have a wide circle of associates, so we can scale these programs to whatever a department needs. So we start with mental health and wellness. We can add personal training. We can add incentive programs. I just brought in law enforcement specific financial advisors because financial wellness is a very big component.
That caused a lot of stress.
Yep.
Our pensions aren't big.
We work with a couple of attorneys that have great things to offer law enforcement, like trusts if they have special needs children. They're also in places where qualified immunity has been revoked. We're recommending that officers set up trusts for their assets to shield them for potential lawsuits. So we try to take that 360-degree view of wellness rather than, as the saying goes, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, absolutely. And wow, to have that 360, you cast a wide net and it is a solid net. For everybody that is listening through the OBBM network, I have had John's website up, missionfirstpartners.net, the entire show. But, obviously, if you're listening on a podcast, you're not seeing it, which is why you need to jump over to YouTube and subscribe. You can watch us there. You can see what John looks like and all of his cool stuff behind him, both Johns. So that's missionfirstpartners.net. You want to go over there and check everything out. John Mulay, is that the best place for people to connect with you?
They can connect on our website. They can connect. There's all of our information on there to connect to us either by email or by phone if people would like.
Oh, that's great. So you guys can visit there. The phone number is there. Pick up the phone. Guys, it is time we get in front of this thing called post-traumatic stress disorder. You do not have to feel like you are alone in this, number one, because you're not, or that you're an island. Let the experts like John Mulay and his incredible staff help you out. John, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate everything you do for our first responders out there, and God bless you.
John,
thank you, John. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for helping spread the word about law enforcement and mental health.
You bet. Have a great one.
You too.
Man.
Wow, just incredible. And
and that was only about 3% of what that organization does. I'm looking at their website, and
yes, absolutely. You have to go to the website, and also so you don't feel like you're alone. Remember, the 22nd of every month, if you join us, as in me and John, walkthebridge.org. We are walking to bring awareness to veteran and first responder suicides. We have got Walk the Bridge happening international. It's an international movement. Walkthebridge.org for more. Hey, you want to jump in to more about mental health, you can listen to this podcast as part of the OBBM network. You can also, it'll be running the replay on our podcast YouTube, again, so you could see what we look like, as well as check us out go to abadgeofhonor.com. You can see where we're out there with our workshops. We will be at IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, come October. And until next week, everybody, we want to thank you for joining us. John, quickly take us home.
Man, I think you said it all. I think it was an amazing show. Thank you. You know what? And if you can, one tagline I just want to throw out, and as we hear you, we will always hear you. And if you need anything, please reach out.
Till next week, everybody. Thanks a lot.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM network programming information, please call 214-714-0495 today.